I just wanted to talk for a minute about CCIJ. So what we do at CCIJ is we bring together uh, investigative reporters, data scientists, and visual journalists. And I'm just going to share to our website. Here we are. Yeah, I'm just going to share to our website. So we bring together these folks to carry out ongoing investigations into key global issues. We are thrilled that Juliana and Simo are here, and Paul as well, because we really have our roots at Wits University and the African Investigative Journalism Conference. We have a strong commitment to working with and learning from individuals and families and people in under-resourced communities. And also what brings us here to training. And so we do have pretty regular, about eight trainings a year. And so this is our third one of this year, if I'm getting that correct. So just here's a little view of our website, some of our members. We have done two major looks, kind of global transnational investigations, and then we're now going to be coming out with a third one relatively soon, getting that going. Juliana's played a really important role in making that happen. And then also we're quite close to launching our new website, where we'll have space for the other exciting types of things that people are doing in our community. So that's just a little bit about us. And I really wanted to now shift to today's training and say how grateful and excited I am that we have friends and colleagues here to present and learn from. So we have Simonia or Simo Mashangoane and Juliana Thornton. These are colleagues, these are friends, these are folks that I've known a long time. So I'm particularly appreciative and grateful to them. Simo is in addition to her role as coordinator at Wits Journalism, at Wits Justice Project, a tremendous project. She's co-founder and director of the Jabari Development Institute. And Juliana has done stalwart work for many years at Wits Journalism. And in fact, through Wits Journalism, which is where we met, I reached out to Juliana about being our initial CCIJ Development Director. And so she did that work in very important ways for several years, and now is continuing to help us kind of more on a consulting basis. So we're really grateful to have Juliana and Simo here to give us a practical guide to fundraising for nonprofits and journalists. Our agenda will be that first, Juliana will present for about 15-20 minutes, then over to Simo, and then we'll have a nice chunk of time to dialogue. So thank you all very much. And then Esther will share some relevant links in the chat as we go forward, including evaluation. But thank you so much. And Juliana, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff. So I'm going to jump right into it. Thanks for introducing yourselves on the Zoom chat. I can see that some of you are relatively experienced and others may be more new to this, to fundraising. This presentation is kind of more geared towards startups and journalists who have never kind of done fundraising before and stuff like that. So it might be kind of basic for some of you, but at least I hope some of the tools and spreadsheets and things like that I can share might be useful for you. Okay, let me make sure I've got my screen shared properly. Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's just at the bottom. I know you did it successfully. There we go.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, very good.
Okay, so where to start? Oh, that's not right. This is where to start. Okay. The most kind of basic, I think, thing to understand before you start fundraising, whether you're doing crowdfunding or grants fundraising, or and whatever kind of fundraising you're doing, I think the most important thing to remember is that people give to people. So what that means is that building the relationship with, it could be your members, it could be your audience, it could be people who you meet at a conference, who might be donors, who might be, with Open Society Foundation or Ford Foundation, et cetera, all of those connections and all of those relationships are going to be quite important in your fundraising journey, because you can apply online and kind of cold calls and things like that till the cows come home, but you're not necessarily going to be successful until you're kind of networked with those people, and that they kind of recognize your name and stuff like that when it comes across their desk. The other obvious starting point is just online research. So whatever it is that you're whether it's specific kind of news that you're trying to fundraise for, it's a specific story, you can obviously just Google and see what's available. But later on, I will be sharing some kind of aggregators where you can have lists of foundations and things like that that might work for you. What I recommend also in terms of getting started is to do a SWOT analysis, which allows you to kind of look specifically at whether if you're an individual journalist or a startup or a nonprofit, to kind of go at it strategically, so that you're not just going for whatever kind of comes across your desk. That you've kind of matched your particular strengths and skills as an organization or as an individual to match the sources of funding that you're going for. And then just a quick reality check. Sometimes I think people come into this thinking, oh, it's going to be quick and easy. I'm going to meet some people, I'm going to ask for some money, and the money's going to be in my account, and I'll be able to do all these cool things that I want to do with it. That's not how it works. So thanks to Esther actually for the metaphor of like going on a date. So if you meet somebody once, that's long enough to kind of see, okay, is it a match or not? Then you have to kind of see them over a number of times to figure out, can we actually work together? So, you need to kind of keep that in mind, that this is not, grants are not going to fall in your lap as soon as you start putting in proposals. It does take time. Okay, so I find it helpful to kind of think about fundraising in terms of these different categories of money. So let me just clean up my. Okay, so and bear in mind that these aren't necessarily all of the categories of money. There might be more, but they all have different kind of pros and cons. And these are, in general, the types of income that you might have available to you, depending on what whatever your situation is. And all of them come with different, pros and cons. So you need to think about that before, before kind of just jumping in and going for them. The first one that I'll discuss are organizational grants. So that's you know, like applying for grants to support your nonprofit specifically or social enterprise. These are from foundations, so Open Society Foundation, Ford Foundation, various philanthropic foundations. The important thing to know with this kind of money is that it's restricted. So it's often time bound. You apply for 1 year or 2 year funding. You provide a budget, and then you need to stick to that budget. It also requires quite rigorous financial and narrative reporting. So you need to be fairly well established as a nonprofit or a social enterprise. You need to have, you know, at the very least, a bookkeeper, some kind of financial management happening to be able to access these grants. Then the grants are awarded on the strength of your organization, or how many years you've been operating, what you've been doing, and whether it fits foundation priorities. So the time that you're going to spend if you're trying to go for this kind of money is going to be in researching the foundation's priorities and making sure that your organization is a fit for them. Because if it's not, then you're wasting your time. So yeah, so those are some of the reasons why you might, you know, consider pursuing or not pursuing that kind of money. Another kind of money would be project grants, and here I'm thinking specifically for specific stories or specific journalists. So, you know, here in this case, it's awarded on the strength of your experience as a journalist, or on the strength of your particular story, whether it fits the call for proposals that has gone out. And then again, you need to apply online based on a specific template, and you would need to be able to report back, etc., etc. So those are project grants. Another kind of money would be earned revenue. Now here you just need to be careful if you're a nonprofit and you're accessing foundation grants from like Open Society, etc., etc. Then depending on what the rules are in your particular country and your particular registration status, there may be various restrictions on, you know, like making a profit or earning revenue in various ways. In general, my understanding is if you're a nonprofit, you can earn revenue as long as that revenue is then rolled back into the operations of your organization. So essentially, you're not making a profit. If you are a for-profit, then in most cases you would not be eligible for those foundational grants that I had discussed, and you'd need to come up with a whole new business plan. But I'm not going to talk too much about that. For nonprofits, there are opportunities for earned revenue around consulting with your staff members. So you could kind of rent your staff members out on a consulting basis. Membership revenue. So, you know, in South Africa, Daily Maverick has done quite well. Paul, I think, can probably also advise us on membership and the kind of ins and outs of that, and whether or not you can actually earn enough to, you know, to keep yourself going with that kind of money. And then there's also ad revenue if you're a for-profit media outlet. The kind of pro of this money is that it's kind of free once it's in the account. So it's not tied to a budget. You don't have to report on it. All of that kind of thing, but your registration status is important for whether or not you can access that. Then another category are individual donations and crowdfunding. So this very much depends on your audience and your contacts and your connections. And also the kind of culture of giving and culture of charity and philanthropy in the, you know, in the specific country that you're in. So in the US, there is very much kind of a culture of giving, that people would donate to nonprofits small amounts on a monthly basis or what have you, you know, and that's quite kind of entrenched in the culture, I would say. In South Africa, not so much, but there are, you know, increasing opportunities for this kind of funding. Once you've got it in the account, it's relatively unrestricted money, but the larger amounts that you might get from people might have more strings. And in general, this kind of money can be a high maintenance in a different way than grants, in that, you know, it depends on your kind of personal relationship with those individuals. So different donors will want to be involved in different ways, and you'll need to be really kind of on top of that relationship and kind of involving them and meeting their needs in a way. So that can be tricky if you're not, let's say, if you're not a good communicator, or, you know, if yeah, things like that, because it depends on the relationship. If you're looking at crowdfunding, the restrictions there are that you should keep it to a time limited thing. So say that you're crowdfunding for a very specific thing, like, you know, it could be a particular story, but it needs to be quite a specific thing and over a limited period of time, and usually not a huge amount of money. So in South Africa, for example, I would say maybe you could try crowdfunding over the course of a month for like 50,000 Rand to do some very specific project. Okay, and then events are another way that you can think about going about fundraising. It's a great way to involve individual donors. You can obviously do online events or in-person events. Keep in mind that if it's an online event, charging for those kinds of events can be tricky. You need to really have you know, something kind of solid on the table if you're going to be charging people for online events. And then there are a whole lot of ideas for in-person events, depending again on how you're situated, whether you have a kind of local audience that you can invite to various events, conferences, seminars. But then you need to keep in mind that there are logistics associated with that. So inviting people, looking after them once they're there, all of those kinds of things. Okay, so those are the kinds of categories of money. As I mentioned earlier, what you're going to want to start with is, you know, a SWOT analysis of your particular organization or individual or startup, so that you are then able to identify which categories of money it's going to be most useful for you to go for. You know, if you have a lot of marketing skill and time, then crowdfunding and individual donations and things like that might work for you. If you are a well-established nonprofit, you know, with a finance department and the ability to report on organizational grants, then, you know, go for organizational grants, that kind of thing. So the SWOT analysis will just help to guide you, because otherwise you can waste a lot of time doing things that actually aren't going to bring you the kind of money that you need. Then you can set up a CRM or just have a spreadsheet of your prospects with deadlines for when you're going to approach them, and then sign up to all of the newsletters and aggregators, and I'll give you some of the examples of those at the end of this. And one of the other things that you'll obviously need is a case for support. So why is it that this particular thing is important, and why should people give you money? Keep in mind that it shouldn't, so don't, you know, yeah, it shouldn't be a finished product. You're going to be tailoring that to the particular prospect that you're approaching. And then just maintain momentum. As I said at the beginning, the relationship that you have with a person is very, very important. So it's the same kind of business principle of, a client in the door is worth more than, some other client who's still out there. You want to keep those relationships going and, and keep them good. Keep your prospect list up to date. Read the newsletters and aggregators that you've signed up to. If you've been successful in getting grants, then you need to manage those grants. You need to track your spending, track your budgets, all of those kinds of things, and submit reports on time. I'm just going to close that quickly and take you through some of the tools, the more specific tools that that could be helpful for you. Okay, is everyone able to see that? Okay, Jeff is nodding, so take it as. Okay, so here are some aggregators which you might find useful. This is a spreadsheet called NewsFuel, which is regularly updated. It's a Google spreadsheet, as you can see, so it's a bit messy, but that is a resource with a whole lot of various donors for journalism. So hold on, I'm gonna have to stop sharing just to get back to where I was. Oh, okay, sorry. My tech skills are. Okay, so sorry.
How can we help, Juliana?
No, I'm just trying to get back to the presentation, and it's not letting me get back. Sorry. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. And then there's another similar Google spreadsheet. I'm not going to go into that link because otherwise I'm going to get lost again. That's a more local, the independent media donor funding tool is more specific to South Africa and African foundations and things. Fundsforngos.org, you can sign up to their newsletter. And they do a monthly kind of newsletter of various grants that you might apply for. Sangonet is another good resource for South Africa specifically. For the US, Inside Philanthropy and Philanthropy News Digest are two newsletters that you can sign up for, which would give you monthly kind of updates on who's open for proposals, et cetera, et cetera. The Institute for Nonprofit News is also an excellent resource. They can also help you get to work with donor search databases where you'd be able to search for individual donors in the US. Those kinds of databases are not really available in the rest of the world. But if you are looking for American donors, then I'd recommend trying out donor search. Okay, also joining networks and joining institutes and things like that can be very important because most of the ones I've listed here, there you can see INN, which is the Institute for Nonprofit News. They send out newsletters, which includes grant applications. All of those organizations usually send out a monthly newsletter, which includes opportunities that might bring in funding. So join them. These are the potential, if you are going for grant funding, those are some of the foundations that you might target. And then finally, again, just kind of, connecting yourself. So CCIJ, I know, often sends out opportunities that you can apply for. Sign up to the Wits Journalism newsletter. Simo is going to be presenting Jabari, her organization. So that's another resource. The JamLab Accelerator Program is an accelerator program for startups. Africa-China Reporting Project is another Wits project, which does provide grants to journalists. Also, the Henry and Kumalo Fund also provides grants to journalists, so look them up. And in South Africa, we have the Talker Paper Awards for investigative journalism, which is another opportunity for funding. And that's it from me. Questions, please.
All right, thank you, Juliana. Thank you. Thank you. No, it's extremely informative. And why don't we, I know some folks were putting in the chat, for example, Vicky was talking about being here both from a personal point of view with some of her own external reporting projects, as well as an organizational point of view. And the things that Juliana just shared really have been core to kind of my own education in helping get CCIJ going, and very much the relationship points in terms of getting started. Really, we really began at the AIJC, and someone from Open Society approached us and so on. So that's very true, as well as the point about things not happening immediately.
Yeah.
So why do we, if it's okay, is it okay if we turn to Simo and then together get questions, or do you want to take questions now, Juliana, or how do you two want to do it?
I mean, if there are any burning questions, otherwise we can hand over to Simo.
Okay, very good, very good. So yeah, initial questions for Juliana. I just wanted to, I saw Brezhnev was trying to get in, but why don't we go over to Simo, and then we'll have a kind of a good 15 minutes for questions and exchange, given that doesn't seem to be.
I'll post the links in the chat here.
Okay.
Now to those presentations and to the spreadsheets.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Well, no, thank you again, Juliana, and then Simo, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Simonia. I'm co-founder and managing director of Jabari, and we are a startup ourselves. We just started working in late 2019, early 2020. So we're still learning a lot of things, but I have been working in the NGO sector for quite some time. So hopefully I can share whatever small knowledge I have in my 715 slides, which I'll try to squeeze into 15 minutes. I'm just kidding. So at Jabari, we design sustainable growth and development solutions for community-based organizations. When we started the organization, it was really just to focus on small media organizations. But as we started towards the end of 2020, we just started working more with community-based organizations and small nonprofits. So that's where we are right now. And I'm just gonna share my screen. Hopefully this technology doesn't fail me. I'm using PowerPoint, a very old school. Hope I get it right. Here we go. Is it okay if I just switch off my screen? Because I find the light from my windows. If I switch off my video, is that all right? Thanks. Yeah, so thanks, Juliana. That was really informative. So I'm not going to repeat anything that she said. I'm just going to go straight into the nitty-gritties of fundraising, like the right into it. Just trying to figure out why it's not clicking. How do I, oh, here we go. So this is so distracting. The screen, can somebody tell me how do I fix this? I'm seeing things. Oh, here we go. So basically, when you want to look for funding, right? Traditionally, what you do is you do your business plans and your proposals. Sorry for that spelling, and then you shop your idea around to a very small number of organizations that are willing to fund your idea. So this approach works like a funnel, right? You've got the fundraiser, you've got you as a fundraiser and your proposal at the wide end of this. And you've got your audience and funders at the very closed end. So right at the wide end, there's a whole lot of us just trying to get through this small opening to get our share of the pie. So what happens is if you fail to point that final at the right funder at the right time, that's a lot of time and a lot of money lost, because looking for funding is quite an expensive venture in its own. And I mean, we all know, I'm hoping that grants are only available for specific fields and specific users. I mean, and it's not really easy to get grant funding. Sorry, I can't read my presentation. How do I move this? Here we go, sorry. And a lot of them come with a lot of restrictions. And those, I find that as a huge con, but it can also be a really huge pro, the restrictions that come with donor funding. And I love that because you don't need to repay them, even though you don't, but also the street guidelines for the application process can make them very lengthy. The street guidelines are problematic sometimes, and sometimes the processes do take time, especially if you need the money now. And you go through this thing that's due at the end of May, thinking you'll get the money in July, only to get the money in the following year. So sometimes that can get pretty tiring pretty fast. So what do donors look for specifically when looking for people to fund? They want to know that your project is technically worth it, whether it's feasible, whether it has any sort of impact potential, and I'm putting that in inverted commas. They want to know whether, they want to look at the quality of your work. So if you've done any work before, they want to know what that type of work did and what the kind of work, what the quality of that work was before they give you any further support. So the focus in the early stages is really just on your team, on the concept, and on the potential of your outputs, on what you're promising to do. And a lot of that then depends on what you can prove you've done previously. So therefore, at this point in the early grant making stages, somebody who's more charismatic and has a team of superstars and has a very innovative idea can mobilize very significant funding before even their concept or even the idea has been tested. So then how do we then do this? As we all know, your proposal should be based on a strategy or a strategic plan. So you need to be very clear on your goals, on your purpose, and you need to be very specific about your objectives. So that includes the problem you're trying to setting out what the problem is and how you're going about solving that problem. You need to be very specific about the exact services you're providing, if any, or your content. You need to know who the target group or audience is, and if you're an NPO, who the beneficiaries of your intervention are. You also need to be very clear about what activities you're going to be doing to implement your project. And you also need to be very specific about the resources that you need. And I'll get into all of these in more detail in my probably somewhere around slide number 50. So then how do you then improve your chances of accessing grant funding? As Juliana said in one of her slides, you need to do a lot of research. You need to be you need to research thoroughly before approaching a donor. Competition for grants is very intense. It's even more intense now. Over the past 5 years, it's become even more competitive looking for grants. There's more of us trying to find very little money. So what you find is that even the grant makers themselves, to avoid receiving hundreds of applications, they're becoming more creative in how to ensure that they filter all of these applications, and they're changing how they're working to ensure that they get the right kind of people to fund. So it's becoming even more competitive than it was, say, even 2 years ago. So if you're not absolutely spot on with what the donors are searching for, it may be best to just save time. So if you're looking for donors, going in you need to make sure that you approach the ones that really, really fit into your specific work or your specific project. And that avoids having to change your objectives to suit what the funder wants. And I've made this mistake. And I've seen a lot of organizations make the same mistake. When you're desperate for funding, a call comes out that looks remotely familiar, similar, or you think you can do some of the stuff and you end up changing what you are about and some of your objectives as an organization just so you can get that particular funding. And at the end of it, finding that it is now a problem having to report or even having to implement what you promised to do. So it's important to find out what the organization stands for, what they want to achieve, and who they've awarded grants to in the past. That will help you to see if you're a right fit for that particular donor. Collaborations are very important and they do increase your chances of success. Sometimes this depends on the size of the grant, more or less than in you just wanting to increase your chances of getting. So if a grant is only about $50,000, you may just want to go at it alone. But if it's big and your organization is small, it's maybe better to collaborate with other people so that it becomes easier to meet the demands of the donor or to be able to improve your chances of getting the grant. So also keep in mind that looking for funding it's a long process with a huge amount of paperwork. So you don't want to waste your time on funds that don't invest in organizations or as a journalist in content like yours. So you want to be very spot on in who you approach. And you want to tick all the boxes sometimes. I mean, if you're in a team, you want to pay attention to your demographics in the team. And you want to have a solid future plan. So having those two things. So if there's a team of 5 and you're all male, and I mean, if you're a team, there's 5 of you and all of you are white men, and that may be problematic to some funders because they all have a developmental goal, in most instances. So you want to be careful of your demographics while you also have a solid pitch or a plan. And also you need to bear in mind that grants are there to support development. So your chances of securing funding will increase if you can show how your project will improve the lives of others. Juliana said this in her earlier slides that people fund people. So you want to show how then what you are doing is going to improve your community or your audience or your beneficiaries. And this can be through anything, employment, solving a need, contributing to economic growth, anything really, but you want to be able to show how your specific project is going to improve the lives of others. And more importantly, you'll need to submit all the right paperwork so that you don't have to come back into it. Because I mean, now we're lucky that some of these things are online where you can check before you submit whether you've submitted everything. But if it isn't, you want to make sure before you hit send that you've got everything that they've asked for. And before, and Juliana has touched into this, you want to have a plan. And you want to know what you want to do and why you want to do what you want to do. And you want to consider again how your plan will achieve positive results. So then how do you go about putting together a winning proposal? I was challenged recently when we were starting with our company Jabari, that how do you describe that we should try to describe our startup in 5 words. That was over a year ago. And as I'm counting right now, we still have about 12 words. We're not there yet. But basically you want to be able to describe your project in a very short sentence. What that does is it gets you into thinking about your organization or your project or your proposal even in a very different light. And I would encourage to challenge everybody to just give it a try. See if you can't do it, keep working on it, and it makes you filter things that are not necessary in your work. So then you know you're very specific to say, this is where I am, this is what my organization does, and you're able to say it in 1 sentence. You want to define the problem or need in the proposal, and you want to be very brief. We've seen proposals where in a 5-page proposal, 2 pages alone are just the problem. And then the rest of the proposal then is on all of these other things, your solution, your budget, your activities, and your objectives. So you want your problem statement to be very brief as well. And you want to describe how your solution will solve the problem. and you want to don't generalize about your solution, be very specific and give clear examples. We have problem X and we're going to solve it by doing Y. And you want to make sure that you avoid cluttered language, avoid long metaphors and flowery metaphors, and the language has to be consistent throughout the document. And if you define your competitors, say for instance, you want to investigate, I'll say for instance, us at Justice Project. We want to investigate the criminal justice system in South Africa. We want to say in a proposal, these are the other players in the field. These organization X, Y, and Z are also doing the same thing. This is what we are doing differently, or this is how we're working together with them. Or if you're not doing anything differently, this is how our work adds on to what's already out there. And another thing, after describing your solution, you want to say, this is because we've got problem X and this is solution Y. And then we're going to be doing 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to get to solution Y. And you want to be very clear about how you are doing it and how it's going to lead to your desired outcomes. Resources and budget, very important. You need to clearly define what the resources that are needed are. That's people, time, equipment, travel, etc. And you want to ensure that the budget is linked to the activities that you mapped out earlier and to the resources. This is very important, and I've been burnt personally many times. You want to find out what the donor is willing to fund, like what the eligible costs are, and what proportion of your action they're willing to cover and over what period. Some donors will have a template, and I'll give a specific example. Say you, organization X says, we will give you you say you want 100,000 for a specific project. And for that 100,000, the donor that you're approaching says to you, we want to know how much it's going to cost, and you say it's going to cost 100,000, but they say we'll only give you 50,000, but we still want to know what you did with the other 100,000, with the whole, what the total cost of the action. So the total cost of the action is 100,000, but we'll only give you 80,000. When you report, you're still going to report in 100,000. So you want to be very specific in the budget, but you also want to show where the other 20,000 is coming from. So this is where now you don't promise that we will find the 80,000 without knowing where you're going to find it from, without knowing if you even will be able to find the 20,000. Then you're avoiding funding gaps if you do get the funding. So the budget has to be you have to be very important. You have to be very careful in how you draw up your budget. And if you're not very careful with this, you can get burnt, as I have a couple of times. So this is the most, in my opinion, after doing the solutions and the problems and the activities, this is the most important part of your proposal. Another important part is accountability, and this needs to be worked into the proposal itself. How are you going to report on the money, but how are you also going to be showing that the money has led to the outcomes that you said you're going to achieve? So you want to show, how am I going to measure progress? How am I going to report? And what systems do I have in place to make sure that I'm able to report? Again, your organization or your history as a journalist is just as important as your future plans. So if you, but also again, don't go into a long history about a whole page about, I'm an accomplished journalist who's done 1, 2, 3, and I've won 50 million awards, and be brief, but also be able to show that you are capable of using the funds that you're getting in a proper way. Your vision and objectives are very important as well. Keep it simple and within the limits of your project strength. I always say to people, you want to work backwards. Instead of saying in the future, imagine it saying, when we are done with this, this is what we want to see, and that's your vision. And then work backwards. Okay, so now at the end, this is our end goal, but then how do we get there? So you want to start right at the end, and that would be your vision, and then work backwards. So, but also remember that not many projects or stories, whatever, can single-handedly bring about large-scale impact on a specific issue. So don't overpromise. Be clear, keep it simple, and then know what your strengths are, and then work within your project strength or your organ or your individual strength. And when it comes to proposals, time is very important. Planning. It shows very quickly if a proposal is rushed. So you want to be able to give yourself time for each page of the proposal. So I went to a training one when they said, give yourself a week for each page of your proposal. So just to go through it and give it to someone else to read. Make sure that all the ticks, all the I's have been dotted and all the T's have been crossed. Make sure that if you do it too quickly, then it just doesn't work. It shows very quickly. Give yourself enough time to do the proposal. So that's where the planning comes in. If you've got a spreadsheet of potential grants or whatever, open grants, and you know that this one is due in July, you start now. You don't wait for like 2 weeks before it's due, because then you're just rushing into it. And what's important to keep in mind is that most decision makers who read proposals see hundreds of similar documents. I always say this to myself. I imagine sending a proposal to somebody and mine is the unfortunate one that's read at 4:30 p.m. So if mine is that unfortunate one, I want to make sure that it stands out as quickly as possible. So I want to make it professional looking, that is easy and quick to read. I want to keep it organized so that it flows. I want to make sure that the most important things in my proposal are visible as quickly as possible within the document. I want it to be short. You can always rather put extra information in supporting documents, but if your original, if you're in the first initial documents, your plan or your proposal is interesting enough and they need extra information, they will ask for extra information. So rather keep it short than keep it long, because no one wants to read very long documents. And most important, proofread. Avoid basic deal breakers such as spelling errors and grammatical slips, because that shows very quickly, and then that just feeds into your entire credibility as a journalist or as an organization. And lastly, doing proposals is very difficult for some of us, and you need to be honest with yourself. If you need professional assistance, then it's important to get professional assistance. And because sometimes a grant application might require details that you don't readily have available. So there's nothing wrong with consulting others in other aspects to help you, especially with the budgeting, or if they're asking for monitoring and evaluation frameworks, and that's not your area of expertise, asking somebody else to assist you with that particular thing. There's nothing wrong with that. And if the application itself provides for in the budget for you to pay those professionals, I would advise to do that. Make sure that you get help if you need one. And I've found organizations that are sometimes outsourcing the entire process. But also if you're doing that, consider what professional fees and whether those can be accounted for in the actual proposal that you're doing. And another option, if you are an established organization, might be to hire an experienced grant writer to work within your organization so that you can focus on other things while they do that. But yeah, but I can't stress enough how daunting it is sometimes. And sometimes if you don't get I mean, 90% of the proposals I've sent out, I haven't received the funds, we're unsuccessful, but then we use those as learning curves. You write back and say, how come we didn't get this? And they'll give you proper feedback, and then that helps you in drawing up your next proposal. Then as you go on, you gain more experience, but then you also gain experience in that you know which organizations to target, but you also know when to really just be specific and spend time and invest time and energy on proposals or on calls that you actually have a good chance of getting, instead of just applying for everything that's out there. But also, can't stress this enough, when drawing up a proposal, be careful to not put yourself in a situation that then will require you to pivot from what your organization is about as time goes. So yeah, that would be me for now. I will share some of my resources with this presentation. I'll include links at the end of the presentation, so where you can get more information about writing proposals, etc. And that's it from my side for now.
All right, thank you, Simo. Thank you very much. Thank you. And really important nitty-gritty, very important points about the kind of common errors to avoid, the number of proposals you put out, but how to use that as a learning curve, and really an excellent point at the end also about don't just go for something blindly or something just to do it, but really think strategically and then be careful of not getting stuff that will take you off your mission. So, really lovely pair of complementary presentations from Simo and Juliana. So thank you both very much. We do have some time for questions and comments. I know Esther will put the evaluation link in the chat, and we are slated to end in 5 minutes, but maybe people can stay on just a little bit longer if that works. And I did want to also acknowledge that Brezhnev Malabo, who has done several stories for us at CCIJ and is tremendous Zimbabwean journalist, colleague, and friend, is here with us as well. So thank you, Brezhnev. So questions, comments, thoughts, responses for Simo and Juliana, things from your own experiences you might want to share. You can either put them in the chat or ask directly, but we want to keep the dialogue going. So Paul, I see you have the mic on. Did you want to say something, Paul?
Oh, I do, but that was just a mistake. But I just wanted to ask, thanks so much for the presentations. One thing that I have found coming back into the space and filling out a proposal the other day was this idea of impact. And I know someone mentioned it and said they were going to put it in inverted commas. And I just wondered if there were any comments on that, because I find that the most problematic. And I feel that like I'm very prone to like over promising when I write these proposals in terms of impact. And I know people don't just want like listener figures or viewer figures or readers, they want like real world impact. And that's a difficult question for any kind of journalism, but especially when you're kind of promising it from a story or a project that hasn't even started yet. I always kind of think back to like the Justice Project and how elegant that is in terms of like using journalism to help people that are, wrongfully convicted. And that's such a beautifully fundable, like nice thing. And I always kind of come back to that as like, but like unable to think of a comparison. So I just wondered if any of the speakers had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, great questions, Simo or Juliana. I know, Simo, you were talking about kind of the organization's history is important as its future, so that could be one way to think about that. But thoughts on that, and other people in the chat about impact? I don't know, Simo or Juliana, one of you wants to go first, but
I can go first. So I put that in huge inverted commas because I mean, those that know me know that I love M&E. And in M&E speak, one of the first things they taught us is impact is usually measured in percentages. The reduction in HIV infection rates in the country, the number of people that are accessing Y, reduction in corruption, because impact is usually linked to your vision, right? So we went into a phase where we'd rather use outcome. So what has been the outcome of your intervention? So the outcome of our intervention is that, like, for instance, Justice Project, the outcome of some of our investigations is that person X, who was wrongfully convicted, had that conviction overturned, right? So then as Justice Project, our impact would be an improvement on the criminal justice system, but then we can't really measure an improvement on the criminal justice system. So, we rather become very careful in using the word impact. And when we do use it, you want to be very specific on what you mean when you say impact, because sometimes we say we want to bring about impact in area X, but then forgetting that when you say that, funders are listening and they want you to report, and then how did you then bring about this change that you said you would? And then that when it becomes very complicated for you fast, because then you'd have to really show how you did that. So then we sort of tend to move away from that. If you're talking about impact at an individual level, in an individual's life, then you have to also mention that in your proposal or in your strategy documents to say, we want to impact 10 people's lives. But then you don't want to say impact a system or impact because then you can't measure that. Only really, really big organizations can use that kind of language. Funders can use that language because they can say we've funded 20 organizations in Nigeria on maternal health, and they've done this, and here's the impact of that funding. So us as people that are receiving donors don't really shy away from using that language.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to come in.
Yeah, Really
Yeah,
nice.
I mean, it's
Simo.
a,
Yes, Juliana. Yeah, please, Juliana.
it's a very good point, and you know, it could also take us into a long discussion around the ethics of donor funding for investigative journalism. In general, when you're going for foundational grants, remember that those foundations are more accustomed to funding nonprofits for like workshops and capacity building and things like that. So I find it helpful to point to the specific, you know, podcasts or articles or whatever that you're going to be producing as the outcomes of the funding, rather than, you know, kind of longer term outcomes such as, yeah, I mean, you also need to make it clear to the donor that as a journalist, you're not in the game of behavior change or advocacy. So, you know, how people react to your content is kind of something that you're, you know, not responsible for. So sometimes it's just a matter of making that clear to the donor that, you know, there is traditionally this kind of firewall between the journalist and the funder. Sometimes that can kind of help you maybe get around the, you know, some of the more tedious requirements around reporting and monitoring and evaluation and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, really good. Thank you both, Simo.
Thank you.
And Juliana and Paul for the question. I did want to acknowledge that we are 1 minute over the hour, so if folks want to leave, please feel free to do so. Juliana and Simo, might you be able to stay for like 5 more minutes if there's a couple more questions?
I can stay for a few more minutes, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so why don't we do like one more question? The only thing I was going to add to the impact question, and this honestly, Juliana has helped me learn on this, is that it is really a relationship that you're building with the funder. So it's kind of a process of educating of the different forms that impact can take. So there can be internal impact of somebody, the growth and someone experiences as a result of doing the work, and maybe expanded horizons, testimonials from journalists you've worked with, as well as external impact in the world. And that external impact can both be sort of the traditional markers, like what Simo's talking about very concretely, like this person was convicted and on death row and now they're not. And then also there can be sort of conversation stimulated, very heavy engagement on social media, people responding to the work. And so sort of over time, thinking of a number of different ways of sharing those different ways. I think basically funders want to know their work and their support is leading to something happening. And it's a really important point that both Juliana and Simo have made, that you want to be very careful to what you were asking, Paul, about not over-promising, because then the funders note that, they go, you know, hey, you said you were going to do this. And really good. So no, thank you both very much for that. One more question, maybe anybody who hasn't spoken yet and would like to share, either in the chat or a direct question. Yeah. Brezhnev, would you like to I see you have the mic on. Brezhnev, would you like to ask a question or make a comment?
Hi, Jeff. Can you hear me?
Yes. Very happy to hear you, my friend.
Hi, how are you?
Very good.
Yeah, sorry, I joined the conversation quite late because I'm having connectivity problems.
Yes.
But I have tried to follow the conversation the last 10 or so minutes, and it's been quite very interesting and useful. Mine is not so much as a question. I just wanted to say thanks to the CCIJ for providing, you know, platforms for us to network. I've taken advantage of the newsletters that Jeff sends. Please keep them going, Jeff. I really appreciate that. Many times I've applied for grants because after seeing what you've written in those newsletters, and I actually managed to get some grants during the COVID crisis, and I really appreciate that. Which takes me to another point about networking. It's important for journalists to to make sure that they also do a lot of networking, because opportunities are there, but sometimes we may not know about them. It's only through networking that we get to exploit the opportunities. And your platforms, the newsletter, I really appreciate. I hope we can see more of those opportunities that you post on the newsletter, Jeff.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Brezhnev, for sharing that. And actually, to the question that Paul just raised, that feels very good to me on an individual level, and also that actually can become a form of impact that we can then share, which is Brezhnev saying, "Hey, you guys shared these opportunities. I applied for them and I got them." So I'm thrilled, both because Brezhnev is a colleague and a friend and a very high-level journalist who has continued working extremely hard in the face of very difficult opposition, really concerted and threatening opposition, as a very brave and courageous journalist, and also that our community is supporting you in that way. So thank you, Brezhnev, for those kind words and that reminder. And the point about networking really gets back to where you started your presentation, Juliana, around is about relationships and networking. So terrific point. Final thoughts, Juliana and Simo, before we wrap up? Final thoughts from either of you or both of you?
No, but yeah, I mean, if anyone has specific questions, then you can also reach out to me and Simo, and we can see if we can help.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. And then Simo.
Hello, Jeff.
Yes. I just wanted to get Simo a thought, and then Richard, it sounds like, has a final comment. So yes, Simo and then Richard. Yes, Simo and then Richard. Yes.
Basically what Juliana said, and fundraising is hard at first, but once you get into it and you start getting the money, it's fun. So it I think the most important thing right now is what I will as advice is just don't deviate from what your objectives are as a journalist or if you're a nonprofit, as a nonprofit. Stick to your guns and look for donors that fit your requirements, and whose requirements you fit as well, and then you can take it from there, but try and stick to your guns as much as possible.
Yeah, so Simo is saying, remember the fun in fundraising. All right, thank you. Yes, and Richard, yes, sorry,
Yes, Jeff.
You wanted to say yes, please, Richard. Yes, please. Then we'll.
Yeah, I'm speaking after the master speakers have already spoken. I thought I would speak before them, just to give them some honor. But all the same, I just wish to express my gratitude for this platform. Actually, I've been off of late. If you noticed, I've been so busy with some work in the bush, chasing some stories, etc. But I must say I have enjoyed this this workshop, and the two presenters, I have enjoyed their presentations. They are quite eye-opening, because most of the times we always face, as reporters or as media practitioners, we always face issues to do with how to source funding, how to source grants, etc. But I think these presentations have opened up our eyes in terms of how you can grant, how you can do your pitching, do your proposal, and maybe land on one. So I'm personally very much delighted, very much happy, and grateful at the same time for the heartwarming presentations. And just like my previous, the previous speaker, I must also extend my gratitude to you, Jeff, for the platform. We're learning a lot, and the connection, the networking that this platform is bringing is quite interesting and quite amazing. Please keep it up.
No, well, thank you very much, Richard, for your kind words. That means a lot to me, and I have noticed that you have been a little quieter. I have noticed that. so I know you've been out doing the work. So I'm very glad that you're joining us, and this is really a community that we're building together. And so I think you're going after Simo and Juliana to honor their contributions to our community is a terrific way to wrap up. So please join me, everybody. And again, thanking Juliana and Simo. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. And then Esther has put the evaluation link in the chat. So please do fill that out because we will, speaking of funding, we will use the evaluation and people's feedback to then try and get support to provide more of these trainings and have more resources for CCIJ. And as Esther mentioned, she will send the links that Simo and Juliana have shared right after the session ends, so you can have access to those materials. So thank you all so much, and we will be in touch soon. But lovely to see everybody, and thank you again for attending and your engagement. Thank you so much.